Every great chef has one dish that changes everything, the plate that defines them, that people travel across the world to try, and sometimes it isn't even served on a plate at all, because in Chicago, at Alinea, one of the most famous dishes in modern fine dining floats, a transparent green balloon filled with helium, tied to an edible string, handed directly to the guest, not just food, but as theater. And somehow, this strange little idea became one of the most influential dishes in the modern era, because Grant Achatz didn't just serve dinner, he wanted to control the surprise itself. And honestly, Alinea is so iconic that Grant Achatz could probably have multiple episodes in this series. Black truffle explosion, hot potato cold potato, the tabletop desserts, dishes that stopped feeling like courses and started feeling like events. But the edible balloon may be the purest expression of what made Alinea revolutionary. Because this wasn't just technique, it wasn't just flavor, it was psychology. Grant Achatz was part of a generation of chefs heavily influenced by the ideas coming out of El Bulli and Ferran Adrià. But while many chefs focused on copying the techniques, foams, gels, liquid nitrogen, Grant became obsessed with something else. How a dining experience feels. Not just what you taste, but what you remember. And that idea would eventually lead to one of the strangest dishes that ever was served in a restaurant. A dish that literally floats away if you wait too long. Interestingly, the edible balloon didn't actually begin as a balloon at all. The original idea came from experimentation. Grant Achatz and the team at Alinea were exploring whether food itself could be inflated. Could you create an edible structure that behaved like a balloon? With mozzarella being the initial idea that was experimented with, trying to stretch it and fill it with air. Not because it made practical sense, but because Alinea wasn't about being practical at all. It was built around the possibilities. That mindset became central to Grant Achatz cooking. Not just asking, how do we make it taste better, but what else can food become? Eventually, those experiments evolved into something stranger, a transparent green apple taffy balloon filled with helium, floating above the table like something from a carnival or a children's birthday party. And that contrast became the real magic of the dish, because luxury restaurants had become increasingly serious. Quiet rooms, rigid formality, and tiny portions that needed explaining in hushed voices. But Grant Achatz wanted to interrupt all of that. He wanted surprise, laughter, interaction, a moment between people that would be remembered long after the dinner ended. And that's the real genius of the balloon, because technically, it's not even the most complicated dish at Alinea, but emotionally, it might be the strongest. And that's what made it revolutionary. Not just the chemistry, the feeling. So how do you actually make an edible balloon? The ingredients are simple, but the key lives in the technique. At its core, the balloon starts like many modern pastry structures do, with a cooked sugar system. Gelatin, sugar, corn syrup, cornstarch, water, and green apple flavoring, cooked down into a glossy candy base. Elastic enough to stretch, stable enough to hold air, but fragile enough that a small mistake can ruin the entire thing. And trust me, having watched cooks make this, it is not that simple. What makes the product so difficult is that if it gets too hot, it becomes too brittle. Too cold, and it won't inflate at all. Once the mixture reaches the right consistency, a special tube is dipped into the candy, and helium is slowly released, inflating the sugar into a delicate sphere. Thin, translucent, almost weightless. Then the base is sealed with a dehydrated apple ribbon, creating the illusion of an actual floating balloon. And once it's finished, it has to be served immediately, because time is part of the dish. Way too long, and the structure softens. It collapses and disappears, which means the balloon only really exists for a few moments before it's gone. And that idea may be the most important part of the entire dish, because Grant Achatz understood something most chefs didn't at the time. Food doesn't just live on the plate. It lives in the moment it's created. Before dishes like this, most fine dining still revolved around refinement. Luxury ingredients, technical perfection, precision. And while yes, Ferran Adrià gave permission for chefs to think outside the norm, Grant Achatz pushed something further. Experience design. The realization that emotional response could matter more than just flavor. And today, that idea is everywhere. interactive courses, tableside presentations, smoke, scent, projection mapping, unexpected service vessels. Chefs designing moments instead of just recipes. You can draw a line from dishes like this to almost every immersive dining experience that followed, because the edible balloon proves something incredibly important. People don't always remember the dish that is technically the best. They don't always remember the dish with the most flavor, and they don't always remember what the expensive bottle of wine they ordered tastes like. But what they do remember is how you made them feel. And Grant Achatz Edible Balloon made guests feel like kids. It made them laugh. It made them feel a way that they may not have expected to feel while inside of a 3 Michelin-star dining room. And what's fascinating is that the balloon also arrived during the rise of social media and immersive food photography, which meant this dish became instantly recognizable. One photo, and people knew exactly where you were. Alinea didn't just create a famous dish, they created an image, a symbol, a piece of edible branding, and that may have been even more influential than the food itself. And maybe the clearest sign of this dish's influence is how often edible balloons started appearing elsewhere. Because if imitation really is the sincerest form of flattery, then the edible balloon earned a lot of admiration. Over the years, versions of the edible balloon started appearing everywhere. Experimental cocktail bars, modern pastry programs, culinary schools teaching students how to create without limits, chefs recreating the technique for social media, YouTubers attempting it at home. Not always because the flavor was revolutionary, but because the idea was. Because the balloon proved something important. A dish could become an experience before the first bite even happened. And once Alinea showed that guests wanted interaction, surprise, theater, fine dining started changing around it. You can see traces of that mindset in chefs like Jose Andres, whose restaurants began leaning heavily into playful presentations and experiential dining, or Massimo Bottura, where storytelling and emotion became just as important as technical execution. Chefs stopped thinking only about plating and started thinking about memory and reaction and storytelling, and where plenty of restaurants started copying the balloon itself, very few captured why it worked in the first place. Because at Alinea, the balloon wasn't just spectacle, it was philosophy, a restaurant where dinner stopped behaving normally. Because every great chef has one dish that changes everything, the plate that defines them, the idea that reshaped the entire restaurant. And for Grant Achatz, it wasn't just a plate of food, it floated. And once diners saw it, fine dining was never quite the same again. This is Chef's Legacies. If you enjoyed this video or any of our other videos, please give us a follow and a subscribe for more stories behind the world's most influential chefs.